Tonight, post-Roe world, the threat to churches and pregnancy crisis centers in the wake of the Supreme Court decision overturning Roe v. Wade.
Plus, new revelations about the January 6th Capitol attack. This as President Biden meets with his Mexican counterpart over the crisis on the border.
And extreme heat pushing the power grid to the limit.
We need a lot more electric transmission infrastructure to really make this work.
Preventing some of the root causes of summer power blackouts.
All this and more tonight on Faith Nation. Stemming a surge in violence after upending the constitutional right to abortion. Welcome to Faith Nation in Washington. I'm John Jessup.
And I'm Caitlin Burke. Tonight, Congress convenes after the July 4th break with a mission, trying to tackle the rising tide of violence in a new world order post-Roe v. Wade.
Witnesses on both sides of the abortion debate testified on Capitol Hill, telling Senate lawmakers about what they've witnessed in the 18 days since the Supreme Court's decision. Here now for more, CBN White House correspondent Abigail Robertson. Abigail.
Well, John, the one thing both sides seem to agree on during today's hearing is that the violence we've seen across the country since the leak of the Supreme Court's decision needs to stop.
The violence has been overwhelming that we have sustained.
In recent weeks, pro-abortion rights groups have firebombed and vandalized crisis pregnancy centers around the country that offer free health care for pregnant women and support mothers and babies.
We have been forced to expend valuable resources for women of up to $150,000 just to protect ourselves.
Abortion activists argued they've been targeted by protesters too, who blockade access to their clinics.
I absolutely condemn violence against everyone, including abortion providers.
And claimed overturning Roe will lead to an increase in America's maternal mortality rate.
People will suffer unnecessary harm as doctors wait for permission from hospital lawyers.
Pro-life witnesses claimed patients given the abortion pill are not prepared for what comes next.
At one point, she said she looked down, and what they told her was a clump of cells was a fully formed baby laying on the floor. This is not health care.
In a heated exchange,
I want to recognize that your line of questioning is transphobic.
Republican Senator Josh Hawley questioned a Berkeley professor's use of the term people with a capacity for pregnancy in place of women.
I'm denying that trans people exist by asking you if you're talking about women having pregnancies.
Do you believe that men can get pregnant?
No, I don't think women can get pregnant.
So you are denying that trans people exist?
Abortion proponents testified not only do they want abortion access codified into law, but they also want Congress to do away with the Hyde Amendment, which prevents taxpayer dollars from funding abortion. John, Caitlin.
Thanks, Abby. Here with us now is Heidi Matzke, Executive Director of the Alternatives Pregnancy Center and a witness at today's hearing. Heidi, thanks for joining us. Now, since Roe was overturned, what kind of violent attacks are you seeing against crisis pregnancy centers?
Well, throughout the nation right now, we have seen everything from fire bombings to broken windows to paint thrown on windows, graffiti. And even here recently at our clinic, a man showed up at 8:15 in the morning with a machete. And thank the Lord that our security caught him before any damage could be done.
Heidi, speaking of security, can you talk about what steps you have taken to protect yourself, your employees, and the organization?
Yeah, since the threats rose over the last several weeks, we decided to take some extensive preventative measures, seeing all of the violence that's happened throughout the country. And so we have had to bulletproof our waiting room, bulletproof the outside of our building. We've had to paint the outside of our building with anti-graffiti coating. We've had to redo our landscaping, 24-hour on-site security. We've had to upgrade cameras in different locations to protect the safety of our patients. We've had to discontinue the use of our mobile clinic that goes out into the community and serves refugees and women that are victims of sex trafficking and and homeless. We've had to no longer use our mobile clinic at this point just to protect ourselves against the threats.
Now, as we heard in Abigail's piece, you shared some moving testimony describing the horrors of abortion for patients who are unprepared for what really happens after taking abortion pills. Other witnesses detailed horrors they believe are coming if mothers don't have access to abortion, claiming we'll see an increase in America's maternal mortality rate. What's your take on that argument?
Well, unfortunately, what they're not talking about, obviously, that life is a human right. And Planned Parenthood and many abortion industries want to hand women this abortion pill, send it to them by mail with no oversight from a doctor whatsoever. And basically they say their problem goes away. And these women are not prepared and are completely knowledgeable about what's about to take place with their bodies. And these women are isolated in bathrooms all by themselves. No doctor there, no nurse there, no pain medication other than ibuprofen. And they are physically going into labor on the floor, in their bathrooms, in the shower, on their toilet. And the PTSD that comes along with looking down and seeing a baby on the floor when you were told it was just a clump of cells. Basically, at the end of the day, when a woman goes to Planned Parenthood and has a surgical abortion, she never has to drive by that clinic again. But it's so vital that all of America understands what is going on with women's bodies with these abortion pills. And when a young woman walks into a bathroom,
We are unfortunately out of time. Thank you so much, Heidi Matzke with the Alternatives Pregnancy Center. Thank you for coming on tonight.
Thanks, Heidi.
Thank you.
A call to action. That's what the January 6th committee considers a tweet from former President Donald Trump ahead of the attack on the Capitol. In a hearing today, they accused him of summoning the mob to D.C. and then spurring them on to violence. The December 19th tweet from Trump reading in part, "Big protest in D.C. on January 6th. Be there. Will be wild." A former Twitter employee testifying that he felt Trump was using their platform to speak directly to extremist supporters.
It felt as if a mob was being organized, and they were gathering together their weaponry and their logic and their reasonings behind why they were prepared to fight. After this tweet on December 19th, again, it became clear not only were these individuals ready and willing, but the leader of their cause was asking them to join him in this cause and in fighting for this cause in D.C. on January 6th as well.
The committee members showed several videos of Trump supporters responding to his tweet with calls for violence against Democrats and even the police, some considering it a call to arms.
Well, a month after boycotting a high-profile summit in California, Mexico's president met with President Biden at the White House today, drawing attention to mass migration at the U.S.-Mexico border. President Andrés Manuel López Obrador, who snubbed Biden's summit invitation because leaders of Cuba, Nicaragua, and Venezuela weren't invited, called for a new status quo on border policy. President Biden, on his part, touted the bipartisan infrastructure bill as a way to stem illegal crossings, even as they hit highest levels since the U.S. started counting back in 2000.
My bipartisan infrastructure law here in America is delivering $3.4 billion to major construction projects at the ports of entry between our two countries to make our borders safer and more efficient for people, trade, and commerce.
In May alone, nearly 240,000 migrants breached the U.S. border. Critics say Biden's policies are to blame for the flood of people and drugs. In Texas, several counties have declared a border invasion. The Mexican president blasted Governor Greg Abbott's order allowing the Texas National Guard and state authorities to send them back to the border. Lopez Obrador wants the Biden administration to issue more migrant worker visas. Well, joining us now is Nathan Gonzalez, editor and publisher of Inside Elections. Nathan, it's always great to see you. Let's start with that topic there. You just heard those record number of migrant crossings at the border. There doesn't seem to be a comprehensive or even a bipartisan plan to address immigration as an issue here in America. So how big of an issue do you think this is going to be, immigration shaping up to be in the midterms?
I think it's going to be one of the top issues, John. I think, and the reason why I know this is because we're seeing it show up in campaign ads. Sometimes we talk about issues and say it's going to be important, but I think it's important to watch what shows up in campaign ads, because that means that candidates or the parties are seeing it show up and resonate in their polling and are then using it in their ads. And so particularly on the Republican side, talking about finishing the wall and sounding the alarm, I guess, on the number of people that are coming across. I think I say it's not as high as the economy, even though immigration is an economic issue, but it's going to be one of the top issues. And I think it puts Democrats on the defensive because Democrats are in charge right now.
Changing gears here a little bit, more sparks from the January 6th hearing today. Is there a sense these hearings are starting to generate more heat than light?
I don't think we know yet. But one thing that sticks out to me about these hearings, I think today was the 7th one, is that we're hearing from a lot of people who worked for President Trump, were appointed by President Trump, who voted for President Trump, who even still supports President Trump. I remember looking back when the Arizona State Speaker Rusty Bowers talked about his concern and why he wasn't willing to do what President Trump wanted him to do. But when he said, would you support President Trump again? He said yes. And so that's different than I think those people who say that this is just a witch hunt or a bunch of people who have been against Trump all along. Like, these are very different voices than what we've heard from in the past. Now, I think a key question is who is actually watching. And I have a feeling that there is at least a quarter to a third of the country who aren't paying any attention to this and are just simply dismissing it. But I would encourage everyone to at least peek in and take a listen or watch a little bit of it, because it might be different than what you think.
Yeah, to your point, different voices, but are they breaking through? You know, earlier you had mentioned polling. The latest New York Times poll shows Republicans prefer Trump to run in 2024 as their candidate. Nathan, do you see the former president as a shoo-in for the GOP nomination at this point?
Well, it's tough to say anyone is a shoo-in, but I think he's the favorite. I think he's running until I'm proven otherwise. That poll made a little bit of news also because it did have Trump ahead, well ahead of Governor DeSantis and others, but he was at 49%. And so some folks portrayed that, well, a majority of Republicans aren't supporting him. But I think what we have to remember is that the field matters. And if there are multiple candidates who challenge him, whether it be Governor DeSantis, a number of senators or former governors, that could divide up that crowd that do want to move on from President Trump, but it allows President Trump to keep pressing on because he still has the larger, solid core of base Republican voters.
Quickly, pressure for Biden not to seek a second term is getting stronger from within his own party. Do Democrats have a way of winning without Biden?
Well, they're going to sink or swim with Biden. I mean, he's the president of the United States, and their fate in the midterm elections is directly tied to him. And there was one Democratic consultant that spoke up when this poll came out, and they said, "Hey, basically forget about 2024. We have bigger problems to worry about in 2022." And so I think the frustration among some Democrats is that there's this big set of elections in November. All Democrats need to be united, and if they're divided and fighting over whether Biden should run again, that could hurt the Democratic candidates that are on the ballot this fall.
All right, Nathan Gonzalez with Inside Elections. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks, Nathan.
Thanks, guys.
Coming up, a new COVID subvariant is rearing its head. Why that has health officials warning of a COVID resurgence.
And welcome back. Growing concerns tonight over the rise in COVID infections. Health officials are sounding the alarm over the new threat from a subvariant. Today, the White House COVID response team said Omicron subvariant BA.5 is responsible for more than half of all new infections.
Closely monitoring BA.5 and its impact. We're encouraged that serious illness, hospitalizations, and deaths have remained relatively low based on the level of infections.
Now, an average of 5,200 Americans are hospitalized every day with COVID-19, the highest number of daily admissions since February of this year. with the U.S. averaging some 100,000 new cases every day.
With us now, CBN News medical reporter Lori Johnson. Thanks for coming on Faith Nation.
Thanks for having me, Caitlin.
Lori, how worried should we be over a resurgence of COVID given this new Omicron subvariant?
Well, it really depends on an individual's risk level. Obviously, the greatest risk factor is age, followed by obesity, and then not having any immunity through vaccination or a previous infection. The good news is most people do have some level of immunity. And another really great highlight of what's happening right now, which is really unreported, is that there is a lot more availability of Paxlovid, the antiviral pills. Think of a Tamiflu. What Tamiflu is to the flu, Paxlovid is to COVID, and now it's very widely available from your doctor through prescription. But guess what? Even pharmacists can give it to you if you don't have a doctor. So that's great news. That'll keep you out of the hospital. It's very effective. Having said that, still more than 300 people are dying every day in the United States, more than 300 deaths a day. That's still far too many, but still also a lot less than what we saw at our highest peak in the pandemic, over 4,000 deaths a day. Remember that back in January of 2021.
Those numbers very sobering. Lori, one expert called this the worst version of the virus we've seen yet. But how controllable is it in terms of outcomes?
Well, the reason he spoke of it that way is because it's the worst that we've seen in that it evades antibodies, even from Omicron infections. Even from recent months, it evades antibodies from vaccines, and it is the most contagious variant so far. We've never seen one so contagious. But the good news is it is not more virulent. It's not more severe. The New York City Department of Health is really taking this seriously and recommending masking indoors again. But most people don't want to do it, and they aren't taking that recommendation. And even in the subways in New York City, it is mandated that people have to wear masks in the subways, but really only about half of all people are complying. So folks are just really over it. There is so much COVID fatigue that has set in.
Lori, in about 30 seconds, how important is it at this point in the pandemic to get vaccinated or to get a booster shot for those who are already vaccinated?
Well, right now, the second booster shot has already been authorized for everyone over 50. So a lot of folks over 50 have had 4 shots so far. The FDA and the CDC are considering to lowering that age for anyone under 50 to go ahead and get that second booster. We are expecting a brand new vaccine available in either October or November, specifically targeted towards the Omicron variant, but unfortunately not towards these new variants that keep popping up every month or so.
All right, Lori Johnson breaking it all down for us. Thanks so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
This summer, extreme heat pushing America's power grid to the brink. When we come back, why blackouts are happening more frequently and how to stop them.
Welcome back. Extreme heat in Texas is pushing the power grid to the brink. Temperatures reaching over 110 degrees. To cope, Texans are putting record high demand on electric companies.
The Lone Star State is not the only part of the country taxed by record high temperatures. A new study predicting repeated blackouts are likely in as much as 2/3 of the U.S. this summer. So why does this seem to be happening more often? Dale Hurd has the story.
The North American Electric Reliability Corporation warns that a hotter than usual summer will cause power failures throughout most of the western U.S. In the Midwest and parts of the South, the situation is even worse, with blackouts expected regardless of how hot it gets. Why does one of the most energy-rich nations in the world have power blackouts? Well, you can't prevent extreme summer heat, but some of the other causes of America's new energy crisis are entirely preventable. The report targets 3 causes. Severe drought is making it harder to generate hydroelectric power, the unreliability of green energy, and a shortage of power from fossil fuels as more and more traditional power plants are closed down. The head of the National Rural Electric Cooperative Association says green energy is not producing enough to cover the loss of fossil fuel power generation.
And if you're going to go through any transition, whatever that may be, we need the 3 T's. We need time, we need improvement in technology, and we need a lot more electric transmission infrastructure to really make this work.
Energy analyst Dr. Marlo Lewis says the government and the banking industry are essentially strangling the fossil fuel industry by demonizing it and driving capital and talent away from it.
This has put a big damper on capital investment in oil companies, natural gas companies. It's also made it very difficult for a coal company in particular, but even for a natural gas company, to get a substantial loan from the banks.
The Biden administration wants America on 100% green energy by 2035. That's just 13 years. Larry Behrens from the group Power the Future says at this point trying to fix the power grid by going back to fossil fuels might not be easy.
If the administration in Washington had a change of heart right at this moment and decided, you know what, we're going to build in redundancies so that we have affordable, reliable energy, at least as a backup, so that Americans don't lose power, it could take years to get back to that point, to build the plants needed and to get the wires needed because of the slow dismantling that they have done of the electric grid in the name of their ideology.
The White House climate advisor, Gina McCarthy, has gone on record saying criticism of green energy should be censored.
The tech companies have to stop allowing specific individuals over and over again to spread disinformation.
But if the blackouts happen as predicted by the end of this summer, many Americans could be complaining about green energy. Dale Hurd, CBN News.
Coming up, a window to the new universe. NASA's stunning new images, millions of years in the making.
After a long-awaited reveal, the largest observatory in space is releasing the first of never-before-seen images.
That's right, Caitlin. NASA's James Webb Telescope launched into space 6 months ago, traveling, get this, 1 million miles into the cosmos before beginning its mission to capture and document the universe. Now, what it's recorded and produced is pretty stunning. Take a look. They're the sharpest images of the heavens ever taken, showing thousands of galaxies in a new light. Webb's first images demonstrate its power to unfold the infrared universe one image at a time. Pretty striking indeed. Thanks for watching.
We'll see you tomorrow.